Well, good morning. Welcome everybody and happy Cinco de Mayo. Today we are going to be discussing hurricane preparedness with homeowners associations and homeowners. We ask that everybody mute themselves until we open up the forum for questions. We have found that if you are having video troubles, that you take yourself off of video if you experience that trouble. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we will get to them as soon as we can. Okay, and then we'd like to introduce Stephanie, one of our team members.
Good morning, my name is Stephanie Gibson. I am the COO here at Martinez Law. I've been here for almost 3 years now, and I consider myself a jack of all trades. I can do a little bit of everything except the actual attorney's work.
Okay, and I didn't introduce myself. I skipped right past that. I'm Jennifer Canizzo. I'm the legal assistant here at Martinez Law, and that will lead us into introducing you to our guest speaker, Tiffany.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Tiffany McElheron. I am an attorney with Martinez Law now, and I have been practicing in community association law and real estate law for almost 10 years. 2021 will be, so yeah, 10 years this year. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about hurricane preparedness and how it correlates to, both associations, realtors and homeowners, and just what you can do to protect yourselves. But we'll get into that a little bit later after Kristen has some upcoming events and comments to let you know about.
Good morning. You both know me, but I know it's been a little while, so I'd just like to give some announcements and updates on kind of what's going on in our world here. We are actually launching flat fees for both our transactional and litigation services. So this is something we've been working on for a really long time. We're super excited about it. It is going to allow us to serve our clients better because we're both going to be on the same page with the same goal. It allows me to tell a client exactly how much their case is going to cost instead of saying, well, it's this much an hour and it could be 1 hour, it could be 100 hours, who knows. We can give the clients a guaranteed number of what their case is going to cost, and that kind of reduces a lot of the stress that comes when the monthly bills go out and the clients open it and they're either happy or unhappy. Usually they're not too happy. So we've worked really hard in doing a lot of research on how to value our cases so that we can provide that service and make sure that it's a fair fee for the client. So we are very, very excited about that. So as you're talking to people and hopefully referring us, if you can mention that, that's one thing that sets our firm apart from all firms that I know in this area handling the same type of work that we do. I also just want to remind you as well that we do give a free 15-minute consultation to anyone working in the real estate profession, realtors, investors, lenders, title companies. This is, part of what we do to help educate the community as they have questions and things come up. We don't want to, nickel and dime everybody every time they have a simple question or they're not sure how to proceed on something. So that is a service that we've always provided, but I just like to give that quick reminder. And then Tiffany, she actually joined us back in December. She is an attorney here. She's also a partner here. So she is amazing. This year is her 10-year anniversary as far as years in practice. So we are so, so happy and excited to have her. She didn't do herself justice in her introduction. So I wanted to throw that in there as well. And then we will go ahead and get started with the presentation. Tiffany's going to go ahead and take over. And then after her presentation, we'll open up for questions and answers.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. So being in Florida, we're used to storms and what we have to do and hearing about them and tracking them and all of these different things. But being prepared and thinking about what you should do on an annual basis is really important. As you probably know, hurricane season runs from June 1st through November 30th. So that's a big chunk of time for each year. And, every year it's unpredictable what we can do. In addition, there's billions of dollars from damages that is accrued each year from various storms. And so taking these steps to mitigate those potential damages is very crucial. So I'm going to talk about, just a few different topics. So the first one will be preparation before the storm, coverage issues, realtor concerns, and then what you should do after the storm. So the first thing that we would recommend is that you create a plan and update it annually. And this would be whether you're dealing with apartment complex, investment properties, community associations, all these things, have a plan and go over that and just review it each year. So some of the things that you should probably think about when you're considering your property needs would be, if you're running a community association or if you're renting properties, you need to know whether you have elderly occupants, whether there's access gates that need to be open, and so people can have access and leave the property should power go out, because those gates will not work. It's important to implement a routine maintenance schedule for the properties that you manage or handle. This includes landscaping, trimming those branches and those trees away from the buildings, away from pool cages, away from fences, making sure dead trees are removed, because those things all become missiles in a storm. It's also a good idea to thin the foliage for your landscaping so that when we have strong winds, they can blow freely through those trees so that there's less risk of those plants being uprooted. Secure loose items, make sure you know what you have on your property, whether it's patio furniture, different things, amenities, those types of things that you need to be concerned about. And then verifying unit owner access. Would you be able to access the property or the unit should there be a concern or something that you need to address? Also, to know your evacuation zones. If you have properties that you manage, it's a good idea to post those evacuation zone information somewhere on the property. And know your insurance coverage. Evaluate that, make sure you have the proper coverage, know what your deductible would be, because it's often 3% of the building value. And that can be quite costly when you have, high valued properties. So do you have the ability to pay those deductibles? Do you have reserve funds available? Would you need to take out a loan? Those types of things are a lot of times considerations for both investors in properties as well as associations. There are options for lines of credit if you wanted to tap into something like that and have that available in advance of a storm. And so those are things that you can definitely consider. Something else that you can do prior to a storm is pre-negotiate contracts with vendors. So this would be disaster remediation. If you need someone to put up shutters or to take, help getting that property secure, having that person kind of on call should a storm come up, that's something that you can do and negotiate in advance, because it gets expensive and you might not have access to those individuals when the time comes if you haven't already secured that person or that vendor. And this would include landscaping contractors to come in and remove debris from your properties right after a storm. And you can negotiate that in advance so that you're the first person that they're going to go to when that need is there. The other thing is to update your records. So take video, photographs of your property as is, document the interior and exterior of your buildings and common areas. Photograph your equipment that you use for your businesses, your computers, your books. Have your documents stored electronically so that if there is damage or if something gets lost, you can access those things remotely. This would include any building plans, your insurance documents, your vendor lists. And then again, if you do have vulnerable residents or disabled residents, it's a good idea to know who those are so that you can check in on them, because the most vulnerable people in our population are the ones that often are at the highest risk when a storm does happen, and knowing when you need to access them. Another thing to do for those properties that you manage would be creating a procedure to secure the premises and facilitate those evacuations. Sometimes residents will refuse to leave. I've not ever left for a storm, but that's our own choice. So you can make those recommendations, but we recommend encouraging those residents to leave, but if they choose not to, we can't force them to. And so one thing that just to keep in mind is the 3 largest causes of death because of a hurricane are carbon monoxide poisoning, heart attack, and drowning. And sometimes this is because people aren't knowing how to use those generators. They hook them up, they have them in apartment complexes or condominiums, and they're not properly set up for that exhaust, and that causes a big problem, especially with the elderly residents. So the next topic I'll go over real quick is coverage issues. And so when you have properties, you need to make sure that your insurance is based on the replacement cost, or you should make sure it's based on the replacement cost and not the actual expenses that you've incurred for that property, but what it would cost to rebuild or completely from ground up. And not everyone has those policies, so that's definitely something to look at. And then also know which things are not covered with your general policy. So losses involving landscaping, fencing, screening, exterior building paint, walkways, pools, those often require additional coverage, as well as flood insurance. That would be a separate coverage as well. Now for those owners or those occupants, for those renters or those occupants, they should have separate policies, renters insurance policies that would cover the interior of that property that they're renting. You can also have business interruption coverage, which if you have, you're unable to move forward with your business, and this is applicable oftentimes to vacation rentals, because if there's a storm or if there's damage, you're not going to have those means for quite some time in some cases. So there is business interruption coverage that is available. And then loss assessment coverage, if you are a condominium owner or homeowner and your association has to incur losses and they have to special assess those owners, you can get special assessment coverage for that. So another thing to keep in mind is you may have to negotiate the damages when you have your claim. Insurance companies that's a business, and they're trying to mitigate their damages as much as possible. But if you properly document and do those things in advance, you're going to have a stronger claim to get the best reimbursement and the best coverage possible. So, and then when there is a storm pending, make sure you don't begin any construction projects unless it's absolutely necessary to protect your life or your property. And then make sure that you secure all those loose items, because as I mentioned before, those just become very problematic when there's strong winds. Now, some other things to keep in mind for those realtors out there are the differences when you have a contract pending on a property and then a storm springs up. So with Florida Standard has its contract that doesn't necessarily allow for parties to cancel or suspend those deadlines because of a potential storm or any bad weather. So that if you wanted to be protected for something like that, you should have a separate addendum or negotiate that addendum separately. A buyer doesn't have a right to re-inspect the property after a storm. So again, if that's something that you want to consider, there would need to be addendum for that. And then the FAR contracts do provide for closing extensions in certain circumstances where there's essential loss or those types of things, but those would all be things to consider which contract you're going to use and what is happening when there's a storm pending or when a storm has just hit. Let's see, under the FAR contract, something else to note is that a seller must maintain the property and keep that insurance on that property. They must continue to maintain the property with normal wear and tear, which is sometimes ambiguous because we do have storms on a regular basis. So, what that entails or what that looks like can sometimes become a debatable issue. Again, even under the FAR contract, a buyer doesn't have a right to re-inspect the premises or cancel the contract. So these are just a few things that you have to be aware of. Another thing to consider is the fact that when there's a storm, an impending storm, or right after a storm, 99% of the time you're not going to be able to obtain insurance on that property. And so securing that in advance or making sure that your dates for coverage begin on a particular date is very important. Let's see. And then real quickly, some of these things that we just need to always be mindful of is after the storm. Again, we're lawyers, so we love to tell you to document everything. And so again, photograph the damages. If you're making any repairs before your insurance coverage kicks in, make sure that you keep those receipts and document everything so that you can show those to your adjuster. File your insurance claim as quickly as possible. And then you are expected to mitigate any damages, so to prevent further damage. So for example, if you have broken windows or broken doors, you're expected to secure that or replace that as quickly as possible, whether or not insurance coverage has actually kicked in. And again, make sure you keep those receipts, keep a repair list of everything that you've done, make a repair list in order of importance of which things that you need to have done so that you can start contacting those vendors to begin those repairs, especially when you have occupants and residents. You want to reestablish the water and power as quickly as possible and make that property useful as quickly as possible, so that you're not losing that revenue. And then, so one thing I thought would be a good thing to quickly note for everyone is there's a resource, and it's called My Home scr.app.book, and this can keep an organized list of your properties. You can keep the photos and videos of your personal belongings, but it has that kind of stored for you, so that if there is a problem or if you need to submit that information to your adjuster, you have it readily available. So I talk fast, but we bill by the hour often, so that is beneficial to some people in those situations. So yeah, my grandfather used to always say I talk like a Yankee, but those were the big points, kind of the broad overview that I had to discuss with you today. And the next step would be just opening it up for questions, whether on this topic or anything else.
So, hey, this is Rich here, and that was a great presentation. Loved it. And many of the things that you said, I own a couple of insurance agencies, and we send out a letter to all of our customers at the beginning of the hurricane season, going over pretty much exactly what you just said. So that was awesome. We also send out the phone number for the claims department to all of our customers, not only at the beginning of the season, but if there's a named storm swirling out there, we send it again to everybody so they have it. One thing that you touched on I thought was great was many people get caught when they're in the middle of a real estate transaction. They're getting ready to buy a home, and they've got their quote for their insurance. Then a named storm happens, and then companies are very quick to put out moratoriums out there where we can't bind coverage. So it's going to push their closing date out who knows how long. And insurance companies are very quick to pull the trigger on the moratoriums, but very slow to lift them after the storm has passed. So if you know people that are in that process, and realtors, we say this all the time to people. If you're in the season, then you need to go ahead and bind as soon as possible, so you're not caught in that trap.
Definitely. And thank you very much. I appreciate the comments.
Awesome.
There is language too, just to kind of continue on that point, in at least the standard part of our contracts, that the parties have to extend closing under certain circumstances, like when services aren't available. So insurance would fall under that. However, again, there's some ambiguity about how long do they have to extend, what's a reasonable time. There's a lot of issues that come up with that, which it's just something we have to deal with in the situation. But like you said, if you combine that coverage beforehand, then that becomes a non-issue if you're looking to purchase or sell during that time.
Perfect.
All right.
Can I get the website, the My Home website? Can I get that again?
Yes, actually, I think I can type it in the chat.
Okay.
Let me see if that works.
And does anyone have any other questions? Unmute yourself, Carlos.
Yes, thank you. I have a comment, being a commercial realtor. So leased space, definitely something that you need to look at, that lease contract, as to whose responsibility and how quickly any damages can be repaired, whose insurance is going to be liable here to participate in the reimbursements, etc. Very important that that's very clearly defined in a lease agreement. Difference between tenants' properties and the landlord's property. So that's very clear.
Absolutely. And with commercial leases, it's kind of a little bit more all over the board because there isn't really a standard lease. And so when you have, lawyers drafting leases, usually there's very specific procedures. If the property is damaged by this percentage, the parties can cancel the lease. If it's under that percentage, the landlord has to fix it, but rent is abated during that time. And it typically will include insurance issues. So I know you know this, Carlos, but that is why having professionally drafted leases and those leases reviewed by attorneys is super important, because while this may seem like something that, oh, that's not going to affect me, that's not going to happen, we know it does. And when it does, we need very specific, unambiguous procedures that the parties know are to be followed, so that there's no dispute, or we don't end up in court fighting over, who's responsible for what and whose insurance company is supposed to cover the damage, things like that. So excellent point.
And I would add that having an attorney prepare a lease, if you are the one ordering that service, then obviously you're going to make sure, your attorney is going to make sure that they protect you as much as possible.
Correct. So that's another thing is, a standard lease is one thing, but most standard documents, whether it be a purchase contract or a lease, are drafted very neutrally. They're not drafted with one party's interest in mind. So to have that individual representation, whether you're the landlord or the tenant, the buyer or the seller, you know that you have a person looking out only for your best interests, and their goal is to protect you under all circumstances. So again, I know you guys know this, but that is another important reason why it's, great to have an attorney not only draft the lease, but make sure they're representing you in that transaction so that you're protected under all circumstances.
One of the things that I see on the commercial lease side where people miss things is for plate glass coverage. So many leases I've seen indicate that the tenant is responsible for gaining insurance for plate glass coverage. And if you miss that, and if you have a lot of glass, like I have in a couple of my businesses, then you're going to be caught with a pretty big expense. So you need to have you need to have professionals looking at every step of the process when you're leasing or buying really anything like that. So.
Sure. And I don't want to kind of categorize them all together, but there are many tenants that either don't read the entire lease or they don't understand the entire lease. And
right.
So that provision you just mentioned is oftentimes in leases, but whether the tenant knows it's there or understands it or actually goes out and makes sure they're complying with that obligation to get that coverage is a different story. So not only can an attorney help you negotiate terms that will protect you, but our job is to answer your questions, go through the lease, make sure you understand what you're signing and what you're getting into, because most lawsuits and disputes that come across my desk are either the contract was ambiguous, so it wasn't drafted well, or the parties just misunderstood, or they didn't know what they signed, or their understanding was something different than what the actual document says. And a lot of those issues can be prevented if they have counsel during that negotiation process.
Perfect. And I want to mention, you mentioned at the top of the segment that you have flat fees now you're introducing. Love the concept.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about
Yep.
it. I probably am overexcited, and you probably are like, why does she care so much about this? But I've done a lot of research into it. And I think it's going to serve our clients a lot better. Like yesterday, I had a hearing that I was probably actually talking to the judge for about 5 minutes, but I had to wait an hour and a half for my case to be called. So under hourly billing, the client is having to pay for that hour and a half where I wasn't doing anything. I was just waiting in line, basically. So it allows us to absorb some of those costs that the client really shouldn't be paying for, but it also, like I said, that certainty in the number. Even if you're given an option of, you can pay, $5,000 for this service, or you can pay anywhere between $3,000 and $12,000. you're going to pick the 5,000 every time. Even if it's possible you could pay less than that, you're still going to want that certain number, especially as a small business and your budgeting and things like that. So we're very excited about it. All new cases that come in, if they're the right fit for flat fees, we are going to quote them on a flat fee basis. I am also going to take some time to look back at current cases that I have that are in the initial stages of litigation and offer to switch those clients over to flat fees if they want, if they can stay hourly if they want as well. But thank you. We're super excited about it. So
I support that move as well. I think it's excellent.
awesome. Thanks for the feedback. I based on the research, the client should like it, but hearing your feedback is helpful. So thank you.
So I think that would be great for my other businesses, the salon that I have. I think that's perfect.
Absolutely.
The devil is going to be in the details. What do you mean by a flat fee and what kind of service you serve a flat fee?
Right. So how we are setting them up is we are breaking the entire litigation process down into stages. And so each stage will be associated with a flat fee. That way, if you settle the case, you don't make it to the next stage, you don't pay that fee. So I think it will work to, we have to do a lot more preparation on the front end to value each phase based on that particular case. It'll show the client a full big picture of what the overall case is going to look like if we make it all the way through that litigation process. And then, they can evaluate better on the front end. Is this something I want to pursue? Is this going to be worth what it's going to cost me? Maybe I'm more incentivized to settle now because I don't want to make it to the deposition phase because that's going to be, $3,000 or whatever it is. So we break it down into phases. So if you hired me to file a lawsuit, I would say, case investigation, getting it filed is going to be this flat fee. Then once we get past that phase, it goes to discovery. So we're going to request documents. We're going to have to respond to discovery. We're going to take depositions. All of that is encompassed in this next flat fee. So it is broken down because, we can settle on day 1 or day 300 so that you're not paying it all at once. But it will be a flat fee associated with each phase.
Right.
All right. Does anyone have any further questions?
No, I'm good.
All
Me
right.
too.
We do
Appreciate the information. It's great.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining. And it looks like Tiffany was able to get that link into the chat box.
Yes.
Jen, if you also wouldn't mind putting your email address there, that way if for some reason the link doesn't work or you aren't able to capture it, you can send Jennifer an email and she can get you that information. And then it looks like Jose has joined us as well. If you have any questions, this is kind of just an open, casual Q&A session. So if you have anything real estate related that you want to discuss or ask, that's what we're here for. And then it looks like Jen went ahead and put her email address there. So if you have, questions after the fact or you need any other information, you can go ahead and contact Jennifer for that.
And as a reminder, we do these roundtables monthly. It's the first Wednesday of every month. Our next roundtable will be escrow disputes, and that will be on Wednesday, June 2nd. Please feel free to share the invite. We do all of the invites through Eventbrite. Feel free to share it with anyone that you feel could benefit from these roundtables. And we thank you so much for attending.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you for
Thank
the
you all for
information.
attending.
All
Great
right.
to see you all.
Have
Bye-bye.
a great day, everybody.
You too.